And good afternoon, everyone. You're watching, of course, IVF Navigator live together with medical doctor, fertility specialist, gynecologist, and chief medical officer of Fertil, Dr. Oybek Rustamov. Good afternoon, doctor.
Good afternoon, Jesse. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining the live stream.
Good afternoon once again. And today, of course, Dr. Oybek Rustamov will be discussing about step 23. We're going back because we had a little technical difficulty yesterday, as mentioned by Doc yesterday. We'll be discussing today, specifically in this live stream, the FSH injection, still part of the 55 steps of IVF Navigator from stage 2 ovarian stimulation. IVF Navigator Live is being broadcasted across Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and other social media platforms. For those who are watching right now, you can also simply message or send it via ivf-navigator.com or send a direct message to our official Facebook page at Fertile Official. Now, everybody, to tell us more about Step 23 FSH injection, let's welcome Dr. Oybek Prostamov.
Thank you. Thanks, Jesse. So I will share my screen. Okay. So can you see my slides?
Yes, Doc, we can see it.
Cool. Okay, excellent. Yeah. So on step 23 of IVF Navigator. So we will be discussing FSH injection. We're on stage 2. We started ovarian stimulation. So today we will discuss why we actually need FSH injection in IVF treatment cycle. So what drugs we can use for FSH injection, then what dose of FSH should be given to each patient, and also when you should start the FSH injection and when you should stop. It's more kind of practical session, so it's tailored for the patients. So I will be talking to patients directly. Okay, so first question is why we need FSH. So in order to understand that, we have to review normal reproductive physiology. So we always refer back to the nature, back to how normal physiology works when we're doing IVF. And that's normal physiology is our reference point. Yeah, so that will help us to understand each patient's individual reproductive function, and it helps us how to tailor our treatment. So in terms of normal physiology, what happens is when women have a menstrual period, they have a very low FSH level. FSH is produced from pituitary gland. So the gradually FSH level starts increasing. Then as FSH increases, it stimulates ovaries to produce follicles. So as its name says, for a follicle stimulating hormone that stimulates the small follicles in the ovaries. So then once one or two follicle has been recruited, then estradiol produced from follicles send the signal back to the pituitary gland. As a result, FSH level reduces, and then that follicle, then LH surge, then follicle ovulates. So normally, because the speed of FSH, increased FSH level, is short in the normal menstrual cycle, and also level of FSH is not that high. Hence, women normally produce one or two eggs in the normal menstrual cycle. But in IVF, we need to produce more eggs, because by producing more eggs, we create additional redundancy, which means we want to get 10, 15 eggs, even if some of those eggs didn't fertilize. And then if some of those eggs fertilized by abnormal sperm, if they didn't become healthy embryo, for example, still we want to have some top grade healthy blastocyst embryos left, which can give us success. So since we want more than one follicle, we have to give FSH from outside in the form of injection, and we want to give FSH in a higher dose and a longer, so that we get 10 times more eggs normally. Otherwise, women produce every month. So um, any given time, women have number of small follicles. They are called antral follicles. All the follicles which measure less than 1 centimeter called antral follicles. Some of the follicles are very small. Let us say pre-antral. They are only 2-3 millimeters. These follicles may not respond to FSH, but the larger follicles, which are close to 10 millimeter, have a receptors on the surface, which is called FSH receptor, and they can take up the FSH which we give from outside, and as a result, the follicles start growing inside. Egg inside the follicle becomes larger and mature. So this we use exactly same FSH receptor as a natural FSH. So the essentially ovaries or follicles doesn't distinguish between natural FSH or FSH caregiving, because the FSH which women use in IVF are very similar in terms of its structure and function to normal FSH. Okay, so now we have, yeah, so we can see from here, this slide. So ovary has got follicles of different size. These are primordial follicles. They do not respond to FSH. These are preantral follicles. They don't respond very well. Then preantral and mature follicles respond very well. So yeah, and in terms of the question, to answer to the question, what drugs we use for as a FSH are these drugs. So gonal-f, Fola, Ovilip, all these drugs are FSH drugs. So there's some drugs which is not on the list. I don't think there are many, but all around the world in IVF clinics, one of these drugs are used as a FSH drug. So, and now we move on to a practical part of storing of FSH injection. So essentially, all these FSH drugs have active hormonal ingredients, and they need to be stored in controlled condition. So these drugs can be stored for a long time. Once you purchase the drug, you can store these drugs in the fridge for long term, which means if you keep it between 2 to 8 degrees of Celsius, you can store these drugs until they expire. So, and then the second form of storage is short-term storage. When you store the drug in the room temperature or in the fridge, if you take out from the fridge and put back into the fridge, so essentially you can store the drugs for 3 months and use within that 3 months of period. After 3 months, you will not be able to use. You have to purchase new drug. And then the third type of storage condition, these are for the drugs which has been already used. So you can see, for example, this Ricavel is one of the FSHs. So it is you use the needle which pierces the cartridge inside the pen. So once you pierce the cartridge, then you have to use this the cartridge within 28 days. So if you haven't used within 28 days, then you need to discard and use new cartridge. So if you're not sure, of course, you have to discuss with the clinic and pharmacy, and of course, you need to strictly follow your clinic's recommendation. Okay, so now we have covered why we need, what drugs we use. Now we will discuss what dose of FSH is prescribed to patients normally. So it can vary. Again, individual clinicians' practice may vary, but general recommendation is to give high dose of FSH to patients with a low ovarian reserve. On the basis of age, AMH, AFC, and FSH, or previous history of IVF, we can distinguish patients and put into three categories. One is a high ovarian reserve, which are the patients with PCOS, for example. They have high ovarian reserve, medium ovarian reserve, and low ovarian reserve. Patients with a low ovarian reserve need to have a high daily dose of FSH to push the ovaries harder, so that we're trying to get as many eggs as we can. So patients with a high ovarian reserve need to have a low dose of FSH because they have a lot of follicles in the ovaries. They may have 30, 40, 50 follicles. We don't want all the follicles to respond. We just need approximately 15 eggs. So we will put them in a lower dose of daily dose of FSH. So patients with average ovarian reserve should have an average dose of FSH, because our objective is not to have a high response, not to have OHSS or low response. We want to have a normal response. A normal response is total egg number between 5 to 20, but ideally we aim to get 10 to 15. So this is how we select the dose. Okay, now this is the last slide. So we'll just discuss the practicality of how to give FSH injection and when to start and when you stop the FSH. So let's say you did the full baseline workup and you are waiting for IVF treatment cycle, then you had a menstrual period, then inform the clinic, do the blood test. If necessary, you do the scan. Then your doctor says, okay, now you can start FSH injection. So this is called day one of the cycle. As soon as you started the FSH, your cycle officially started, and we normally call this day one. So you may hear clinic staff saying day 5, day 1, day 7. That means day one starts from the first day of your FSH injection. So normally you start FSH on the second or third day of menstrual period, because if you had a period today, for example, by the time you do blood tests and the review, so usually more than a day passes, then you normally start FSH from the second day. If your blood results already available, you can start same day. So it's fairly safe to start FSH within the first 3-4 days. If you couldn't start on day one, you can start day 2, day 3, because still during that period, this is early follicular phase, your own FSH and LH will be low, so you can safely start. Again, you have to discuss with your clinic, and it's in strictly follow the clinic's instruction. So this is when you start FSH. You start the FSH with menstrual period. So, and then how often do you give FSH? So you have to give FSH at least once every 24 hours. So FSH circulates in your system more than 24 hours, but if you have a period interval a bit more longer than 24 hours, the concentration of FSH starts coming down. So that's not really ideal for the developing follicle, because each follicle has got its own threshold. Once you reach threshold of FSH for each individual follicle, that follicle gets activated, goes into the growth phase. So, and that follicles needs that much of FSH constantly. If FSH levels goes up and down every 24 hours, then that's not ideal for the follicular development. So this is why it's very important to have a FSH injection on right time. Let us say if you do injection at 8 p.m. every day, 8 p.m. You need to have injection. If you have a little bit of delay, let us say 20 minutes, 30 minutes, doesn't make huge difference, but you shouldn't have too long of delay. So in terms of stopping FSH, normally FSH is stopped on the day of the trigger. So it can be stopped earlier if necessary, but normally it's stopped on the day of trigger. You have a last FSH injection, then you have a trigger shot, and then after trigger, certainly you should not have FSH because it will not first work, and it's not necessary. And so after the trigger injection, so all the injections stop. FSH, like we said yesterday, antagonist will stop. Last injection will be trigger, and after that you just have a break and wait for 36 hours before you have a collection. So this is when you stop FSH injection. Okay, so this is the end of my presentation, JC.
Right. Thank you so much, Doc, for those. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, we are moving on with a couple of questions for Dr. Arbeck. And here's the first one. What is the difference, Doc, between the FSH injections?
Yes, good question. So there are essentially two the big types of FSH injections. One is FSH alone, and second one is combined FSH LH injection. So you don't actually need LH hormone to stimulate the ovaries. So you need FSH hormone to stimulate the ovaries. So without FSH, you can't stimulate. So you can do stimulation only with FSH alone, or you can use a drug which has a combination of FSH and LH. So you can see from the slide. So essentially, the FSH. Can I share the screen? 1 second. So you can see from JC. Can I share the screen?
Yes, Doc.
So you can see from the slide here, FSH alone drugs, then FSH LH combination drugs. So again, this is in terms of content of the drug. and in terms of difference in terms of technology which is used to get these drugs, there are also two different types: recombinant and purified. Recombinant means that it's been created in the lab in artificial way. So these are gonalev, bimfola, overleaf, and all these drugs. And purified drugs are urinary FSH drugs. And yeah, so these are the main differences of the drugs. But generally, we think that all these drugs are equally efficient, and that's why all these drugs are in use. And individual patients, you may see difference in their response according to the drug, but in general population, their overall efficacy is believed to be seen.
All right, thank you so much, Doc. Now, next question that I have here is, can you stop the FSH injection if the patient is having already the high stimulation?
Yes, so in terms of stopping, so once you start the FSH, you should continue until you obtain the response you wanted. So you should not stop and start. So usually you stop once at the end. So if necessary, you can stop a little bit earlier. So that's called costing, which means, let us say patient has a scan on day 8. You can see fairly good response, but you want to give a couple of more days for maturation of the follicles. Then you can stop the FSH and continue antagonist injection and monitoring and trigger a little bit later. So which means you stop FSH a few days, couple of days before the trigger. That's called costing. It's generally safe and doesn't impact the egg quality if provided it's not very long. It's less than 3 days. Because what happens is with FSH injection, as you start giving injection, the concentration of FSH starts building up in the blood. So even after stopping, it doesn't drop immediately. It takes a couple of days, few days before fully it clears from the body. So still you will have some effect of FSH even in stopping. But if you stop too long, then that may actually impact the quality of the eggs.
All right. Thank you so much, Doc, for clarifying that. And there you have it to all our viewers. And for those who will be watching a little later, the replay, you may send still your questions in all our social media accounts. You may also send a direct message to our official Facebook page at Fertile Official. For now, ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to ask everybody's attention to the screen. Let's watch this video. For now, we would like to invite everybody, of course, to try out the free trial, 15-day free trial of IVF Navigator and all of its features. IVF Navigator is your fertility companion providing detailed interactive information about all aspects of IVF. Available for download on the Apple App Store or Google Play. Follow the simple, easy steps to start right away. You can see it on your screens right now. All you have to do is to follow those simple, easy steps, and definitely you will enjoy the wonderful features of IVF Navigator app. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, at this point, we would like to inform everybody that in less than an hour as well, we will be discussing still together with Dr. Oybek Rustamov, of course, the step 25 cycle monitoring. I hope that's correct, Doc.
Yes, that's right. So we will discuss how we monitor actual IVF treatment cycle during ovarian stimulation.
All right, there you have it. And we will see you all again in less than an hour. Of course, this is the IVF Navigator Live together with Dr. Oybek Rustamov. Thank you, Doc.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.